The state of the political debate in Canberra is wretched. There's been a race to the bottom of the barrel on refugee, asylum seeker issues, and that seems to continue. Who can get toughest? They seem to believe that, who can get toughest, well, they'll win most votes. But there are an awful lot of people in Australia, if you like, in the middle ground, who'd like Australia to be a fair-minded, decent country. And for a long while, Australia acted in that way. But when we did, we had a different kind of parliament. When my government made the decision to allow a very large number of Vietnamese and other Indo-Chinese refugees into the country in the 70s, late 70s, and also into the early 80s, the Labour Party did not oppose it. They didn't play politics with it. Gough Whitlam had earlier made a decision, no, we're not going to take these people, but when I changed that, he was more supportive than not. And that meant that Australia could continue with the bipartisan policy on these issues, which had existed from the moment Arthur Calwell began his major immigration program, 1946 or 7, before, well, I was alive, but most of you weren't.
Mr. Fraser, what's your view on the coalition's turn back the boat policy?
Well, it's not going to work. Are you going to have the Navy spending its time towing boats back? And Indonesia is not going to accept that. I mean, if our relationships with Indonesia are pretty sensitive. The recent conversations seem to have gone quite well, but can there be a real expectation of a regional solution which is going to work over time? Nothing is going to work suddenly, quickly. But a regional solution alone, I mean, we're part of a worldwide problem. The numbers of asylum seekers seeking places throughout Europe has risen dramatically in the last 2 years. Australia, Labour and Liberal talk as though Australia is the only target. It's not. There are 600,000 people floating around Germany, 170,000 about around Canada. And if you take the smaller countries in Europe, the numbers are very, very substantial indeed. About 30,000 in Australia. And our politicians speak as though we're the only target. Everyone's trying to come here. We are a tiny part of a world problem. And other countries, it seems to me, manage to handle it with a bit more compassion, a bit more decency than we do.
So do you agree with Kevin Rudd's claim that China had its risking relationship with India? With Indonesia?
Well, it's certainly not going to help. I mean, turning the boat back is not a policy, because the government itself has missed opportunities. When the Houston report, I think, suggested that we should take quite a considerable number of people who are proven to be refugees out of Indonesia. Now, if we'd done that, that would have reduced the incentive to get on boats in Indonesia. But then we didn't. A very small part of the increase, which was quite substantial and obviously welcome, very, very tiny part of that was allocated to Indonesia. And I'm sure Indonesia would have recognized that. They would have recognized that making that allocation larger, much larger, would have reduced the pressure to get on boats. What neither party will accept is that policies of deterrence are not going to work if people are genuine refugees. If people have been brutalized, if they're in fear of their lives, if they have family members in jail or killed or whatever, or tortured, and if people want a future for their kids, in those circumstances, the incentive to try and get somewhere where they can have a future and live without fear is massive.